So, when we talk about these basic features of translation and we come back to them, we see that communication as the key factor. We must remember that in order to convey the same communication intention as the source text author had in mind when he or she wrote the text, in the same communication situation, each language uses different linguistic resources. We don't use, and this is a problem of equivalence, are we achieving equivalent intentions, equivalent meanings, equivalent forms? When it comes to form, it is obvious that different languages use different linguistic elements or linguistic resources to express a similar communicative intention. So let's say, for instance, greetings. Different languages have different ways, let's say, of expressing or offer different possibilities for speakers to convey the idea of "I'm happy to see you," you see. Or in certain communicative situations, like when someone sneezes, different languages have different formulae or different resources as well. We need to be aware of those, and if in a certain situation we were to translate literally, just by word for word taking the meaning of the words or the resources used, say for instance when someone sneezes into another language, then obviously the communicative results will be much different. And I always mention this. This example comes to mind often in the third installment of the Indiana Jones movies. The two main characters, Indiana Jones and his father, Dr. Henry Jones, played by Harrison Ford and Sean Connery, respectively. There's a moment in the film when both actors, their characters have to decide. Then in a crossroads in a road, riding a bike, escaping from the Nazis, and they have to decide whether they should come back to Berlin, to the lion's den, to recover a diary with all the notes and years of study that Henry Jones has put into the effort of finding the Holy Grail. The mythical cup where the legends identify as carrying the blood of Christ, or if they should, instead of going to Berlin, in Germany, they should maybe go and find and help and rescue a friend that is in trouble. So in one of these, while they are arguing about this dilemma they find themselves in, the character of Indiana Jones takes the Lord's name in vain, and Henry Jones, the father, Sean Connery, slaps him in the face and said, "That's for the blasphemy." In the Spanish version of the movie, the dub version of the movie into Spanish, the character of Indiana Jones instead the translator has translated the blasphemy, which is just naming the name of Jesus out of context, which in an English-speaking context is considered to be blasphemous by some individuals. The Indiana Jones character says Jesús in Spanish, and by the translator unaccountably just imports the same linguistic means which are considered blasphemous in the source language and the source culture, and by using the same Jesús into the target language, into the target culture, in this Iberian Spanish or European Spanish, the translation of the whole scene, the movie, becomes ridiculous, because no one would slap an individual in the face by saying Jesús, because it so happens that being such a Catholic country and so entrenched in the culture of the New Testament and Catholicism and Christianity, then the mentioning the name of deity or individuals related to or connected to deity has become commonplace. There are hundreds of sayings, popular sayings that include the name of God, the name of deity, Christian references, and they are not blasphemous. They have become commonplace in certain circles amongst Spanish speakers. So obviously you cannot just borrow the translation as such in order to recreate the pragmatic situation, the communicative situation. In order for it to make sense, you would need to adapt the blasphemy so that it would make sense and it would merit a slap on the face. Because in fact, Jesus is used by some people when someone else sneezes to wish them well. See? So we have taken, by being faithful, so to speak, to the words, to the form, we have transformed the message. We have been disloyal to the message and to the need for communication, which is an overall aim of translation, as we have seen already. So if we look at meaning, we need to remember, like in this Indiana Jones example, that context is important, and that we are not there as translators only to look at the dictionary, at a bilingual dictionary, and just come up with meanings, you see, because we need to look at context, and the meaning of words as used in the source text is updated by the context. So take, for instance, the Spanish estación de tren. See, when we look at the word estación in the dictionary, we'll see in Spanish, in a monolingual dictionary, in Spanish dictionary, we'll see that estación has two main meanings. On the one hand, well, they have several, but the two we're going to be using in this example. One of them has to do with the place, the location where people are sheltered while they wait for a train to come by, so they can go in the train or board the train and become passengers and move from A to B. So that's one meaning of estación, a station. But we also know that estación also means season of the year. Las estaciones primavera, verano, otoño, invierno. So knowing that we have these different words and different meanings, we have la gare in French, we have train station in English, we have stazione in Italian, or treno, we have the Bahnhof and Zug in German. If we were to translate this ad from Renfe, this is taken from Amparo Hurtado-Albi's book. I think it was a really good example that she included to showcase the importance of context and how the words of the dictionary meanings of words are not enough oftentimes when they are used in texts and in contexts. So if you see this ad is meant to be invite people to travel by train all through the year, to use the national railway system in Spain. Renfe is the traditional railway authority in Spain, and the slogan is "Cualquier estación es buena para viajar en tren." And what we see in the pictures are the same train station in the summer, the springtime, the fall, and the winter. So you obviously notice what they are doing with the noun estación here. Think about it you can stop or pause the video for a minute or so, and consider if you were entrusted with translating this ad into English, what problems would you find? What translation problems would you find, and how could you solve them? Think about that question for a minute, and then hit play again. Well, yes, you probably noticed that estación has two meanings, two dictionary meanings, two denotative meanings, as we call them, dictionary meanings in English, in Spanish, but these do not transfer. So the pun, the play on words, estación, every season is good or proper or fit for you to take a train, and then the use of estación as train station doesn't work in English. If we have to sacrifice. And if we were to just just to rely on the dictionary meanings of train station, every train station is good, every train station is great to travel by train. The result would be meaningless. It would have been useless as translators, because we would have become we would be raising eyebrows with our literal translation. We would not be faithful to the intended meaning and the intended response by the authors or the senders of the text in Spanish, as the result would be unintelligible for the English readers. Obviously, this is an ad. This is a promotional text, and promotional texts are multi-channel or they're variegated in the sense that they tend to have text, sound. They also have images or iconography. So you probably will have to come up with a completely different ad, trying to find a new pun. So this would be an example of extreme adaptation. Some would say that it wouldn't be translation proper, that it would be a new campaign, a new ad. So it's really creative in this case, and sometimes it's actually called, as a side note, it's not called translation. In promotional texts and adverts like this and ads, you are dealing with copy. You are creating new text and new images. But the point here is made. You cannot rely on the meaning of words as you find them in the dictionary. You cannot just uncritically replace estación and use train station, because we are not achieving communication. We are not producing a meaningful text for the readers, the target readers, and because the use of estación has been updated by its insertion in a text and in a wider context. Because translators deal with texts, with units, textual units. Another example would be adaptation of movie titles. So when it comes to translating, Hurtado reminds us that the translator, with his recipient or intended user in mind, has to solve problems derived from the discrepancies existing between both source and target cultural context. We're dealing with cultures as well, and we're dealing with a plethora of allusions, reading between the lines, understanding the meaning of the source text is essential for the translator, because we need to make sure that we know that we see all the allusions and the networks of meanings, and then we make the best decision possible to recreate the meaning of the text for a new environment. So if you look at this movie, the movie flashed away on you see the original English name of this animated movie. You may have seen it or not. But in this case, what we have very simply, you can Google it, but this flashed away movie, what we have is a pet, a mouse. He's the protagonist, and he somehow ends up being flushed down the toilet of his posh upper class owner's home in London, and he goes down the tube, down the drain, down the sewage system, and he finds that he is stranded in a reduced copy of the City of London in the sewage system, and all sorts of rats and mice and other creatures live there, and the story moves on from there. If you look at the title, a translator would be aware that flushed away is not only a pun but also an allusion. We have an allusion to the movie starring Tom Hanks called Cast Away, when the protagonist, played by Tom Hanks, goes down, his FedEx plane goes down, and he's stranded in an island for years. So in this case, we have that play on words with being flushed under the toilet, and then we also have the castaway reference. And to the right, you see both the titles of the European Spanish on the right, Ratónpolis, and Lo que el agua se llevó for the Mexican version. Do you see what they did? with the allusion. So you see, have they been faithful to the form as such? Are these literal translations or are they adaptations? You can also consider, do the translations do justice? Do they do justice to the source text, to the intention, the rhetorical intention and communicative intention of whoever wrote the title for the movie, the original movie, the English movie? And you can come up with a yes for both answers, for both cases. Not to the form, no, they haven't been faithful to the form, but they have tried to emulate, recreate the allusion in the source text. There's an allusion to a movie that hopefully is familiar to the audience, and they will chuckle when they see it because they'll recognize the pun. You see, on the one hand, the translator or adapter in the Mexican version decided to connect the movie to Gone with the Wind, a movie that has been in the headlines of late, an adaptation to the big screen of a novel from the North-South, the Civil War, and with a matter of slavery and so on in it. In Spanish, traditionally, that movie, Lo que el viento se llevó, it has been translated as Lo que el viento se llevó. So in this case, you see Lo que el agua se llevó. The translator has been faithful to the rhetorical intention. There's an allusion there and a new play on words, in this case with water and with a movie, the Hollywood component and a trace of the actual movie plot. In Ratonpolis, the focus has been turned to the city, and Ratonpolis is also an allusion to an avant-garde black and white movie, early science fiction, pioneering movie called Metropolis. So as you can see, these are two good examples of how translators have to navigate discrepancies between cultures, and sometimes they have to depart from form or literality in order to become communicative, to be meaningful, and for the new audience. And they have to come up creatively. On occasion, they have to come up with new ways of being faithful to whatever the rhetoric intention, the purpose of the original was in the source language. So, just to drive the point home, this connects with Ferdinand de Saussure as the father of structural linguistics, when he identified linguistics with this structural way of looking at translation, languages as systems, complex systems that have different layers or different components or different aspects. On the one hand, he is remembered by his theory of the sign, in which he he underlined the duality of the linguistic sign. On the one hand, we have what we mean, what we refer to in the world, say for instance, and on the other we have a combination of sounds that we have decided that it's used to signify that. So we have the signifier, whatever is signified, and the signifier. We say table in English, that's the signifier, and for us, when we listen or hear or read table, we know that it refers to a contraption that's used to lay objects on. It could have maybe 4, maybe 3 legs. It has a surface and so on. So it's made of wood, etc. So that's Ferdinand de Saussure. He came up with this differentiation, this dual nature of the linguistic sign, and he also came up with this, suggested that languages, on the one hand, we have the social element, and the systemic element. On the one hand, we have the individual element as well. So languages, on the one hand, are systems, and that's what he referred to as langue, with the French word, or language. The English language is a system with rules, with a vocabulary, with spelling. And then on the other hand, we have parole, or speech, or el habla, el acto del habla in Spanish. We have instances of use in which users of a certain language system select certain elements from the system, from that repertoire, and they use them to convey messages in a context, in a certain situation. So translators move, or we as translators would work in the parole, in the speech, in the textual dimension, not so much in the language dimension, because that's basically what we have seen. Translation as a textual operation. We deal with texts. We don't deal with languages only. We deal with instances of use, contextualized usage of certain aspects, certain resources from language systems that an individual has used in a certain context. And we need to be aware of that context, and we need to make sure that we transfer that to a new context in a meaningful way.